Hi everyone, this is Jenny. I'm going to do a video for the DT team. It used to be Scrap Friends, now it's called Creative Concepts. It's now under a new owner. And I'm going to do something a little bit different from a scrapbook layout, and I'm going to do a cover for a mini album. My daughter recently turned 10 and I've been planning on doing a little mini book that maybe either has a month of every day of her 9th year or 12 pages or 10 pages for every year of her years up until this past one, or maybe just every birthday up until this past birthday. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but I wanted to start with the album and kind of get a feel for how the rest of start with the cover, excuse me, and get a feel for that and how the rest of the album will work. So I'm gonna have fun and just do some mixed media and see how it comes out. I don't really have too much of a plan other than I just pulled lots of papers and things I wanted to use, and I want to make it pretty layered and intense on the background but have the title and the actual pieces be pretty simple. I bought these from, I believe, Michael's, and they are just pre-gessoed canvas. It says Artist Love. They are 8x8 pre-gessoed pieces. And they're pretty thick, but I thought they would be great for the front and back, or even, you know, some in-between pages. So I plan to use them sort of for the front and back of a couple mini albums, and I've got a big heavy-duty punch I can use for that. So that's going to be the base, and I just pulled lots of things. I think I might use some stamps for some layering. This key sort of stamp, this little time alarm clock from Tim Holtz I love, and lots of things with numbers on them, maybe as a background. I pulled lots of pieces of paper that have text on them because I thought I might do it sort of a collage of text and then gesso over the top of it. So I've got this pretty piece of crepe paper and another crepe paper sort of ledger piece. I love this piece of paper and I've been hoarding it. I haven't used it for that reason, so I thought it kind of went well with the two of them. I really didn't want a whole lot of graphics. I wanted it to be more text and simple, but I love those colors. I thought they would go nice with what I'd picked, and I thought if it does get gessoed over the top of, then it might work out okay. This is another piece from the crepe paper Maggie Holmes line that I thought I might cut some pieces out of the that little ticket and some of the other words and things like that. Another music note piece. This is like my all-time favorite piece of Dear Lizzie paper from American Crafts. So those are all kind of on the same theme or color base, things that I obviously can't stay away from. They're this sort of mint and pink and a little bit of yellow. Most of these, except for this kind of American Crafts, have more of a cream base, so I may not end up using that, but if it does get all painted over, then it will be okay. I really want to just play and not think about it too much, so we'll see how that goes. So I pulled some masks. I've got this little butterfly mask. This is the main one I wanted to be sure to use. That's a number mask. And this sort of big polka dot I thought would be a nice background. And then for the title part of the album, I had pulled these stickers. Either wanted to do spell out 10, or just have the numbers. And I bought this little piece of wood veneer that I planned on having in the middle of the album. So I wanted to have, you know, it decorated with all of the background pieces I'm going to have, and then I'm just going to have that. Very simple with the either TEN or the numbers in the middle, and have that be the cover. I thought about having some of this is from Maggie Holmes too, maybe this little piece in the background if I didn't use gold thickers as the title letters. I'm not quite sure how that's all going to work yet, but I've pulled all of that. I also have some of this tape from 7 Gypsies that has numbers on it. A couple little die cuts I've got extra laid, you know, from other projects in this neat little Celebrate. So I really don't want to make it too complicated. I want it to be simple in the elements I add to it, but have the sort of background layers be a little bit more rich and complex with their layers of depth. So that's kind of the idea. We'll see how that goes. But I have lots of inks from Heidi Swap and some shadow inks, some Versamark, some Mod Podge and gesso, and then I've got some gold embossing powder, white embossing powder, a couple different mists, this neat modeling cream that is like an iridescent white pearl, and then this is my favorite right now. It's this embossing paste that's gold. It's just, oh, it's just luscious. It's like icing. Another gold paint from Martha Stewart I thought about using instead of embossing, and another paint and some brushes. So I am going to get started, probably be sped up because this may be just a whirlwind process, but I have been looking forward to doing this little book cover for a while, and so I'm just going to play and have fun and see where it goes. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm going to start out by painting this wood veneer with that gold metallic paint from Martha Stewart. And it's actually maybe balsa wood. It's very thin. It didn't really soak up the paint too much, but when I put it on there it didn't look very metallic. It's more matte colored. It's a nice lovely gold and soft, but it's not, and you can see the shine there a little bit better, but it's not very it's not the gold I had really kind of had envisioned, so I end up not using that, but I did, you know, paint over it to see how that would work to begin with. I decided I wanted to have a sort of a white border around the outside of the cover, and so I just used this washi tape that I had lots of to mask it off, and I got worried a little bit after I started using the Mod Podge that I might have Mod Podged the washi to it, but it actually worked pretty well, and I do like the way it came out. So I just go for it, and I started ripping up pieces of the papers that I liked that I had chosen, and just started adhering them with the Mod Podge and putting them in every different direction and just making sort of this collage background. When it all comes down to it, honestly, you know, a lot of those pieces it wasn't that important that some of them were cream based or not cream based, not like a scrapbook layout, because a lot of it did get covered up. But I think that was just part of my process, and I'm usually much more type A and much more a little bit OCD about some of my things not being lined up and not crooked, and that's kind of why I like sometimes just letting go and being able to play like this, because it makes me relax and not think about things that much. I do end up pulling some pieces off and relining them up, but for the most part it's just fun to play and sort of let my inner artist see there. I'm trying to straighten that piece up. Anyway, I just continue on with that until I get the majority of it covered. And like I said, I mean, honestly, you really can't see a whole lot of that, but I did take cues from a lot of those colors for other things. So then I started to get worried there about about the washi being able to come up, but it did come up and it stayed pretty nice. So I go ahead and then just Mod Podge a little bit of that border to make sure that it had the same sheen on it, that sort of not super high gloss, but it's glossy. And then I actually used my heat tool a good bit on this, because I did want to just keep my train of thought and keep this sort of creative flow going, and this ended up going a lot faster than I had planned. I guess that's the good thing about using a lot of products that need to be manipulated right away. And even though a lot of it had to wait to be dried, it wasn't too much sitting around. So I just put a thin coat of gesso over the top of it, and I did get a little bit too much, so I kind of wiped some of it off with a paper towel. And then I go back and heat it again with my heat tool. And that pretty much dried it. So this is that big circle mask, and I just wanted a very faint background of the sort of dots on top of that, just to give it another layer. And I decided I really wanted it to be clean. I didn't want to have too much, since I was going to mist it, I didn't want too much mist on the border and those other pieces, so I ended up taping a lot of it down. That's the good thing about washi, is that I guess I have so much of it, it's okay that I feel like I've wasted a bit of it. So I just sprayed a light mist of this Heidi Swapp Color Shine in blush, and then pull the mask off. This is that key background stamp that I used, and I went through a couple of these different colors of shadow inks. They're very similar. One is wet cement and the other one is I can't remember what the other color is, and it's actually backwards. You'd think that the wet cement would be a grayer color, and it's a little bit more, there's more brown in it. It's wet cement and soft granite, that's what it is. So whichever one it was I used was the more gray and not as brown. And then I used that number stamp that was from a Studio Calico class with that mint green from Heidi Swapp. This is the little clock stamp I had, which I thought was appropriate since I'm trying to keep with numbers and time and the, you know, her birthday and the age of her becoming 10 and all that. So this, I ended up deciding it was a little bit too harsh, that gold. It was just too bright and too, it was a little too brassy, so I didn't end up using that. I just took a little bit of that paint, that acrylic paint, and kind of rubbed it on the edges to balance out a little bit of that mint green. That acrylic paint was much more blue, so it didn't really look as good with the green. That's why I didn't use that much of it. I used that tape there to put, sort of just have another piece behind that wood veneer. And I'm just playing around with a lot of the other pieces I had. I thought I might layer some of this sort of trashy tissue paper roll that I had on top of it and Mod Podge that down, but it didn't look as good, and I thought it was going to cover up too much of it. So this is where I decided that that color was not as metallic as I wanted it to be, and I decided to go ahead and emboss it. So I just dipped the whole thing in this giant embossing pad I have and covered it in this gold embossing powder. And I have a hard time trying to emboss things that are really large. It doesn't heat up and make it as solid as some of the other pieces I do that are smaller, but I still love the way it turned out. I mean, it's very glittery, and it's grainier because of that being a large object, and I don't know whether I just didn't put enough on there or maybe I dried too much, but I'm happy with the way it came out. But in the end, it did not look good with that gold polka dot from crepe paper. So here is that pearl modeling cream, and I used that number mask on the background and put that all over the top of it. I just taped a couple little corners down to make sure it didn't move. The modeling cream is a little bit thicker than that other embossing paste I had been using, but it is so nice. I love the way it came out. It's very subtle, but it's soft and nice, and it just I had a little bit of a hard time trying to get it up because I didn't want to touch it with my fingers too much. But I thought it was a nice, in some places it's a little bit translucent so you can see some of the papers and things behind it, and some places it's more opaque. So I dried that up good, and then I decided to just do a couple other little pieces behind the wood veneer. I misted just a white doily with, first I tried the Color Shine white, and then I just did a this Tattered Angels Marshmallow, I believe is the color, which is just a white sort of, it's got a little bit of a glitter to it. So I went ahead and adhered that to the middle with Mod Podge just to kind of stiffen it up a bit and make sure it didn't really come off. And then that was the sort of base for the, and I went ahead and covered the whole thing again with Mod Podge just to make sure that none of that modeling cream got, if it got scraped or anything, none of it would pull off. So it's just a nice solid piece of coating over the whole thing, you know. So then I go ahead and it actually dries it really stiff. It's almost like starch, which is kind of neat because I curled up a little bit of the edges. I used a little piece of this leftover gold foil paper that I had on another project, and I just loved it, these little leaves. So I used that behind it and glued them down. I got a little bit of glue on the leaves, so I'm just trying to clean that off a bit. And I used glossy accents on the back of this, and I used a good bit because I really wanted to make sure it stayed. And some of the stickers from the back of that little piece of wood, those are my nice little weight blocks, or my punches. So after I made sure that got really well stuck down and I was happy with it, I had a little piece of a die cut that was left over that I'd already hit here. It says love at the very bottom. It's hard to see, but because of that gold, I just decided to go with these white thickers that I had that are white glitter. They're old. I've had them for a long time, but I thought it was a nice simple solution. These are the close-ups, as you can see, and then you'll see the final product here at the end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this inspired you to get a little crazy with a mini book cover, and check out the other projects and tutorials that are going on at Scrap Friends or Creative Concepts. Thanks so much. Bye.